In the end, the fuse was lit, and everything ended up exploding. And VisualPolitik viewers, this time it seems that the events will go far beyond a simple military skirmish between the terrorist group Hamas and the State of Israel. That phase is now behind us. On 7th of October 2023, hundreds of Hamas terrorists invaded Israel by land, sea, and air, razing everything in their path. Operation Al-Aqsa Flood had begun. Hundreds of people, more than 1,400 at the time of making this video, were killed without discrimination based on age, sex, or nationality. Men, women, and children who were strolling, picnicking, riding in their cars, partying at a peace music festival, or even in their own homes. Wherever they passed, the Hamas hordes left a lethal trail. Not to mention the dozens and dozens of people who were kidnapped and driven back to the Gaza Strip. The terrible and harsh images of the Hamas attack in Israel have been so bleak that we do not even feel able to reproduce them here. Although I'm sure most of you have already seen many of those images on social media. Images that reflect a rawness that we had so far only seen in groups such as ISIS. An unprecedented manifestation of hatred, even by Hamas's usual standards.
Israeli music festival, 260 bodies recovered from site where people fled in hail of bullets. Hamas threatens to kill a civilian hostage every time Israel hits Gaza civilians without warning.
This time, Hamas has acted differently from what we are used to. They are working in a much more coordinated way, with many more troops in battle, and with more advanced ground, ballistic, and technological means than usual. And this is precisely what has brought up a lot of questions. Important questions. Can Hamas do this on its own, without any operational brains behind it? Why start an open war against Israel right at this point in time? Obviously, we are still looking at very recent events, but the truth is that there are more and more signs that seem to indicate one specific country. We are talking, of course, about the Islamic Republic of Iran. But why would Iran be behind such an atrocity? The fact that the Persian country has every reason to have encouraged such aggression against Israel at this very moment. In fact, I think we could safely say, in the absence of further details, if there is one thing that seems clear, it is that this whole macabre and terrible story leads back to Tehran in one way or another. So, VisualPolitik viewers, in this video, we're going to tell you all the details. But before we go any further, let me tell you about one of the most common cybersecurity threats out there. Imagine going to a coffee shop and connecting to a free Wi-Fi network named Coffee Free Wi-Fi, which looks totally normal and not out of the ordinary. However, it turns out that the Wi-Fi is actually being hosted by a random person trying to impersonate the free Wi-Fi access. While you're enjoying that free Wi-Fi, he or she has access to your data, as that person created that same network that you are using on his or her own PC. And so, when you connect and go into the banking system that you usually use, the information then flows via the intermediary, the imposter device, and all the information you entered can be captured. So what can we do to avoid these situations? Well, you should always check for lock and HTTPS near the destination URL, and use NordVPN, as it will encrypt your data flow regardless of whether the destination connection is secure or not. But wait, because there's more. Remember that when you're using NordVPN, you can browse without borders, choosing from over 5,800 ultra-fast servers in 60 countries all around the world. Also, NordVPN's threat protection will keep you safe, working in the background, even when your device isn't connected to a VPN server. And remember, you can use it on up to 6 devices on every major platform: Windows, Android, iOS, macOS, Linux. So don't wait any longer, check out NordVPN and get 4 months extra on a 2-year plan by going to nordvpn.com/VPEN. And if you change your mind after trying it out, don't worry, NordVPN has a 30-day money-back guarantee.
The terrible target.
In order to understand what role Iran may have played in this whole matter, it is very important that we first tell you a little about what exactly Hamas is, what views this organization has, and above all, what they are working towards. Well, Hamas is a terrorist group with a jihadist ideology that has been ruling the Gaza Strip since 2007. So how did they come to power? Well, you see, 2 years earlier, in 2005, the Israeli forces that maintained military control of this territory withdrew unilaterally. From that moment on, a power struggle broke out in the Gaza Strip between the two Palestinian factions, Hamas and al-Fatah. This power struggle ended with a violent assault on power by Hamas in Gaza, while al-Fatah maintained control of the West Bank. Yes, there were elections, but basically Hamas seized all power by force later. Now, why is this important for what we are going to tell you in this video? Because contrary to what many people think, Hamas does not share or accept the idea of two states, one Jewish, Israel, and the other Arab, Palestine. On the other hand, this is a solution that is more or less accepted by al-Fatah. Let's be clear, in the case of Hamas, this organization pursues the total elimination of the state of Israel and the expulsion of the Jews from the region through jihad. They consider that this entire territory belongs to the Muslims and that the only law that should govern it is the Sharia. Look, for example, at these two articles from Hamas's own founding charter. They could not make it any clearer.
The basic structure of Hamas consists of Muslims who have given their allegiance to Allah, whom they truly worship, who know their duty towards themselves, their families, and country. In all that, they fear Allah and raise the banner of jihad in the face of the oppressors, so that they would rid the land and the people of their uncleanliness, vileness, and evils. Article 3 of the 1988 Hamas Covenant. Hamas believes that the land of Palestine is an Islamic waqf, holy inalienable donation consecrated for future Muslim generations until Judgment Day. It, or any part of it, should not be squandered. It, or any part of it, should not be given up. This is the law governing the land of Palestine in the Islamic Sharia law, and the same goes for any land the Muslims have conquered by force. Article 11 of the 1988 Hamas Covenant.
In other words, as you can see, Hamas was not born as a Palestinian liberation movement at all, but basically as a jihadist group that has the ambition to fight to extend the territorial control of Islam, and that is how they have operated for years. We are therefore essentially talking about a terrorist group in the style of others, such as the Islamic State, Islamic Jihad, or Al-Qaeda, perhaps with a more developed political side. But ultimately, its objectives, or at least those of its military wing, are similar. And let me stress, because this point is crucial, they neither support, nor believe in, nor accept the two-state solution. In itself, the Gaza Strip is a good example of this. They have ruled it with an iron fist since 2007, and basically since then, their fundamental objective has been to maintain the struggle with Israel. The brutal aggression of October 7th is the best example. VisualPolitik community, when Hamas in its founding charter speaks of jihad, it is essentially talking about annihilating Israel. And this involves two things. On the one hand, the fact that Hamas is a self-declared jihadist terrorist group differentiates it from the al-Fatah government in the West Bank, which does accept the two-state solution. In any case, given recent events, this is a solution that now seems to be nothing more than just a mirage. That is, when we talk about Palestine, we have to clearly differentiate between the al-Fatah regime in the West Bank and the Hamas regime in Gaza. They are not the same. On the other hand, the issue of jihad is also important, because Hamas shares the same goal of annihilating the Hebrew country with Israel's historical enemies. And of course, given that they rule and control the Gaza Strip, that makes Hamas an enormously important, almost indispensable player in any confrontation with Israel. Given the geographic location of the Gaza Strip and its total control over this area, Hamas has the ability to destabilize and attack Israel very easily. This is what they have been doing for years with rockets, and that is exactly what they did on October 7th. This capability has made Hamas very attractive for Israel's great opponent, and we are talking, of course, about Iran. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran has maintained a policy of enmity and active hostility towards the Hebrew state. Threats of war and destruction have been constant. Now, what exactly is Iran looking for in the Palestinian region? What motivations does this Islamic Republic have for being so active in its confrontation against Israel? And perhaps the most important question of all, why? Precisely at this moment, does Tehran seem to have decided to play hardball and support, or even promote this brutal thrust against its arch enemy? Well, we're going to take a look at that right now. Listen up.
The fist in the shadows.
As we've already told you here in past videos on VisualPolitik, in recent years, some of the most influential countries in the Arab world have been gradually changing their stance towards Israel. The culmination of this process was the Abraham Accords, whereby first the United Arab Emirates and then Bahrain recognized and established normal diplomatic relations with the state of Israel. They were later joined by Sudan and Morocco. Be that as it may, the point is that since the signing of the first agreements in 2020, the United States has been working alongside Israel to broaden its scope. Oman, Jordan, Kuwait, and above all, Saudi Arabia. In fact, negotiations with the latter country were well advanced just prior to the attacks. The agreement between Riyadh, Jerusalem, and Washington was the icing on the cake, the great political milestone that would change the Middle East forever. And keep in mind that in addition to the recognition of Israel, everything indicates that this agreement would also come with the renewal of the US security guarantee on Saudi Arabia, and perhaps even with the Saudi announcement to increase its oil production levels.
Riyadh said willing to boost oil output to help clinch normalization deal with Israel. Saudi offers to up production as gesture toward historic three-way agreement that would also include US-Saudi Defense Pact, weapons sale, and civil nuke program, WSJ reports.
However, on 7th of October, all this was derailed due to the Hamas attack and the consequent Israel retaliation. So the question is, who is going to be most harmed by this deal that seemed on the verge of being announced? Well, perhaps it wasn't good for Hamas and the Palestinian National Authority itself. They would have lost a lot of influence. You could say that the Palestinian conflict was in danger of being pushed into the background. But above all, we can find one regional power, a giant among giants in the Muslim world, for whom this agreement was frankly ill-suited. You know perfectly well who we are talking about. Iran has been, is, and will be, as long as the Islamic Republic lasts, the historical and staunch enemy of Israel. For the Tehran of the Ayatollahs, the Abraham Accords are a historic betrayal of Islam by the Arab signatory countries. In fact, the Islamic government of Iran has announced its goal as being the annihilation of Israel. And that is precisely why, in recent years, Tehran, the Revolutionary Guards, and the Quds Force have become the major influence of the anti-Israel movement at the international level. What's more, aside from the religious question, Saudi Arabia's recognition of Israel would have dealt a serious strategic blow to the country's interests. Its influence in the region would diminish, its oil revenues would fall, and the new alliance of the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the other Arab countries would find it easier to carry out any operation for dismantling the Iranian nuclear program. To make matters worse, Iran's anti-Israel campaign is causing the Ayatollah-controlled branch of Islam, Shiism, to gain appeal among the more radicalized Sunnis dissatisfied with their respective governments. In fact, for decades, Iran has been financing, training, and arming all kinds of Arab terrorist groups to fight and attack the Hebrew country. Of course, we're talking specifically about what are Iran's three major operational branches in the region today: Hamas in Palestine, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the al-Assad regime in Syria. And among those, we could also include some Iran-backed militias in Iraq, with a lot of influence on the Iraqi government. As you can see, it's no trifling matter. We're talking about a confrontation that directly or indirectly has even led both Israel and Iran to intervene militarily in each other's countries. Take a look. In 2018, Iranian forces fired missiles at Israeli positions in the Golan Heights. And not surprisingly, as we've already mentioned, Tehran has been in charge of financing, arming, and training groups that have not stopped attacking and harassing Israel. For its part, the Hebrew country has also carried out numerous operations in the land of the Ayatollahs. For example, Israel is behind the assassination of at least 5 scientists in Iran's nuclear program since 2010. Likewise, the Iranian government also blames Israel for a powerful explosion at its largest uranium enrichment facility at Natanz in April 2021. Then in October 2021, an Iranian general accused Israel of carrying out a cyber attack that paralyzed gas stations across the country. And in January 22, an ammunition depot near the city of Isfahan was attacked with a drone, an operation for which Israel was also accused. As you can see, we're talking about a real Cold War in the Middle East. And what can I say? If you think about it, in this light, a forceful action by Hamas against Israel starts to make some sense. On the one hand, it could derail the Israeli-Saudi agreement, thus avoiding negative consequences for Iran, starting with oil prices. On the other hand, it reinforces Tehran's position as the great political religious reference in the Muslim world, the only ones who remain true to their promise to reclaim all of Palestine for Islam. In fact, look at this tweet from Iranian Ayatollah Khamenei that was posted just 4 days before the brutal Hamas attack.
3rd October 2023. The usurper regime is coming to an end. Today, the Palestinian youth and the anti-oppression, anti-occupation movement in Palestine is more energetic, more alive, and more prepared than ever during the past 70 or 80 years. God willing, the movement will achieve its goals.
Only 4 days later, Hamas launched its terrifying attack. Is it a coincidence? See for yourselves. And take note, because besides Iran, there is another important player that has also benefited a lot from the Hamas attack. Any idea who we're talking about? Well, take a look. In addition to the Islamic Republic of Iran, Putin's Russia may also directly benefit from the Hamas operation. After all, the tripartite agreement between the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel was key to the White House's policy against Putin. Think about it. With this agreement, the United States would have been able to mitigate the global oil shortage. Naturally, this would have reduced crude oil prices, Russia's oil revenues, while improving the economic situation of Western economies. That economic easing in the West would have limited the erosion of public support for the Ukrainian war that seems to be happening. And, of course, if we take into account that Moscow and Tehran have become much closer in recent years, all this starts to seem not so coincidental anymore, doesn't it? Now, what were the signs of all this involvement that we are discussing? How exactly was the bloody Hamas attack against Israel that began on 7th of October orchestrated? Well, we're going to take a look at that right now.
An agreed war.
Rarely has a war, an invasion, or a military action left so many clues before it happened. And rarely has Israeli military intelligence, in this case, Amman and Shabak, failed so badly in their predictions. You see, the fact is that since the month of August, there have been more than evident movements between Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Iranian regime. We're talking about meetings in various places whose regularity and frequency were highly unusual. For example, according to reports from the Wall Street Journal, senior members of Hamas and Hezbollah have acknowledged that Iranian security officials helped plan the Hamas surprise attack and gave them the green light at a meeting in Beirut last Monday, 2nd of October, 23. The details of the Hamas assault, the largest violation of Israel's borders since the 1973 Yom Kippur War, were reportedly ironed out through several meetings in Tehran, Turkey, and Beirut, involving representatives of Hamas and Iran, as well as Hezbollah. According to the same report, officials from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard reportedly worked to plan the air, land, and sea incursions that Hamas might be able to carry out. So you see, with all that we have told you, Iran's participation in this conflict, although not yet confirmed by the governments most involved, seemed practically a fact. Iran had more than sufficient motive to act and encourage an attack precisely at the time it occurred. Be that as it may, what seems clear is that this latest war will transcend the Israel-Gaza conflict. It will most likely have major regional and, who knows, even global implications. Here on VisualPolitik, we will be keeping a close eye on everything that happens, but for now, it's your turn. Do you think Iran is directly involved in Hamas's attack on Israel? What do you think are the chances of a war between Israel and Iran, or even a major conflict involving the United States itself? Leave us your opinion in the comments, and let's start a debate. And if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you have not already done so. And if you want to support our work even more and receive some cool perks in return, then don't forget to check out our Patreon. You will find all the links in the description. Thank you so very much for watching. All the best. See you next time.